managing a team in a redraft league is like playing three-dimensional chess, then managing a team in Dynasty is like four-dimensional chess. It's trying to understand the ebb and flow, the rise and fall of players at every position based on what they're going to do this year and your chances of winning the title this year versus what they're going to do in future years and your chances of winning the title in future years. And do you bail this year to strengthen your positioning for future years? Or do you go all in this year? Or do you try to do both? And sometimes you do neither because you just don't have the capital to do much in the future until you get into next year's rookie draft and you start to rebuild your team, especially if you've inherited a bad team from a guy or a woman who bailed on their team and you're now filling in, trying to build from scratch. There's all sorts of possibilities in a dynasty league. It is hard to break it down and simplify it because of all those permutations. I'm going to try to spend a few minutes to just try to simplify one aspect of it. And it could be for any position, by the way, quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, whatever. I'm going to focus on running backs just because as a running theme, the intrigue of running backs, and the fickleness of running backs in the sense that we don't really know what's going to happen 2 years down the road with most running backs because the typical career span for many running backs is about 2.5 years. The great ones could be 4 to 6 years. The really great ones could be 6 to 10 years. But that's the point. Where 1 year a player dominates, you look at Todd Gurley, and then 2 years later is essentially out of football. That happens a lot with running backs. And so dynasty managers, I think in particular, and justifiably, that's not their fault, struggle to maintain a strong running back core. Not all managers. Some get in on the ground floor with some running backs. If you drafted Bijan Robinson, or if you drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, or many years ago you drafted Christian McCaffrey, despite the missed seasons with injuries, you got great value for whatever you invested. You're getting great value. And in the case of Robinson and Gibbs, you might get great value for 5, 6 years or more. But a lot of running backs, it's not that way. In 2022, because I was thinking about this morning, I thought, what did the dynasty landscape look like in 2022 for running backs? Could you have, if you knew what you were doing, and I'm not claiming I know what I'm doing, snagged some of these bottom of the barrel running backs instead of investing heavily, or in addition to investing heavily in one or two great running backs? How would you do? I mean, Najee Harris in 2022 had a dynasty ADP of 2 at the running back position. Javonte Williams was at 5. The soon to be declining Austin Eckler was 6. Dalvin Cook was 8. This was not a reliable top 8. I mean, 4 of those major flaws in reasoning in hindsight at the time seemed to make sense. You didn't know Javonte Williams was going to suffer a serious injury. You didn't know that Eckler would decline that rapidly. You didn't know that Dalvin Cook would go from perennial elite or near elite running back to not being able to make a team. These things happen quickly. And so it comes back to, okay, if you're going to invest in a dynasty running back when they're 25, 26 years old, why? I mean, if you're paying elite value or near elite value, why not sell high with these guys when they're 25, 26? With the understanding that each year, especially in a dynasty sense, the risk that they are going to plummet in value increases dramatically. Again, not all running backs, not necessarily most running backs. Many great running backs in their mid-20s are effectively finished fantasy-wise in the next couple of years. Back in 2022, the ADP of Jordan Mason was 88. The 88th ranked running back. Most people back then couldn't have imagined. And yet, at the same time, if he, by a year later, is, a third stringer in a backfield, you got a pretty good shot that at some point Mason might be a backup, might be a handcuff, and then who knows? And then suddenly they catapult in value. Keep in mind, Mark Ingram back then was at 80. Tristan Ebner was at 81. So these ADPs, when you get really, really low, are kind of random. They're basically forgotten players, and no one's really thinking about them until suddenly we're forced to think about them. Jalen Ward back in 2022, his ADP was 73 at the start of that summer, or at the end of that summer, right before week one. Kyron Williams was 69. Jerome Ford was 68. Chuba Hubbard was 66. You get the idea here. And for every Chuba Hubbard, I get it. There's a Trey Sermon, who was at 60. A lot of people back then would have invested in Sermon over Hubbard. Sermon had the better, I believe, draft capital, was seen as a potential future starter, whereas Hubbard really wasn't. At the same time, we can see here how someone with a very, very deep bench of 20 plus players in a dynasty league could just swoop in and grab, let's say, two or three running backs. Let's say the handcuff, the third string, and the fourth string running back on a team with an aging starter. And you're probably not paying much for those three combined, and you're hedging your bets that one of them is going to rise to the top. It's a pretty good bet to hedge. Isaiah Pacheco was 54 back then, by the way, undrafted free agent, behind Melvin Gordon at 50. Melvin Gordon, a declining talent. Pacheco, who knew that he would be rising like he did, but at the same time, he started out, by the end of that summer, he was probably around, seen as second string, third string, possibly a future starter. But he made some noise that summer. And so the fact that he was outside the top 50, is pretty interesting given what we know now. Looking, at, the next year, running backs, ADP in 2023, it tells a similar story. Some of them are similar players who just didn't make good on their promise in 2022. So here they are again in 2023. Kyron Williams at 82. Third stringer Chris Rodriguez at 76. Who knows? With Austin Eckler, and with Brian Robinson, who knows if Rodriguez might get his shot at some point. He's still a third stringer. If you invested in him back then, this is a good example of not a great investment, and yet there's a possibility that he could be a handcuff at some point this season, and then all bets are off. Anything can happen at that point. Looking up further, Kareem Hunt, 62, who knew that he could rise to the occasion a year later for Kansas City, and yet he was a warm body with a great history who was not finished yet. So at 62, in hindsight, yeah, it makes sense. Hubbard at 61, Jerome Ford at 59, Jalen Warren at 57. Again, these are dynasty. The idea that they might have done anything the year before, maybe some people thought of it as a fluke, and you move on. But these guys were apparently here to stay. And then Chase Brown was at 47 then, by the way, in Dynasty. Chase Brown, 47. Generally viewed as no worse than the third stringer to start that season. Quite possibly a handcuff. Why not take a flyer on a guy in a high-powered offense as a handcuff who's bordering on top 50? That makes a lot of sense to me. And then last year, in the heading into the start of the season, in Dynasty rankings, Jordan Mason was at 75. I talked about Jordan Mason in last August as a must draft in all redraft leagues, not to mention Dynasty, but all redraft leagues. You got to get this guy, including as well as Isaac Correndo. It was a double feature kind of blog post I wrote in August about how Christian McCaffrey, based on historical evidence, had about a 92% chance of a serious regression or major injury in 2024. And you need to roster Jordan Mason and, if you can, Isaac Correndo, because you never know. And if you believe what I believe, one of those two is going to be a good spot starter some weeks. And it turned out Mason was a spot starter more than that for many weeks, was terrific. And then Correndo stepped in and was terrific several games as well. You could get these guys for pennies. The writing was on the wall. All you had to do was look. And then moving on to other guys, Justice Hill, 68. He's not going away. He's still technically a handcuff as of today, and you could get him at 68 value. Last year in the preseason in Dynasty, Correndo was 66. Tank Bigsby was 65. Bigsby had a terrible rookie year, but why give up on him? Bigsby was pretty high on my list in terms of rankings last summer, in part because I really like talented rookies who bomb. And in some ways it was because Bigsby was battling injuries. He was better than that. And so his depressed value was not sustainable. He was going to rise to some degree, and his 65 Dynasty ADP reflected more his poor rookie performance than what he could do in the future. And then you've got Will Shipley at 61, potential handcuff in Philly. Tyrone Tracy at 59, the rookie back then. Rico Dowdle at 58. We all know what these guys did. Braylon Allen, 53, never give up on him, backup for the Jets. Hubbard at 51. No one really thought that Hubbard consistently outside the top 50. He keeps producing, and people think, it's not going to last. And yet it does. J.K. Dobbins, frequently injured. When healthy, stepping up, 49. Bucky Irving, 46. So much potential. A lot of these guys, handcuffs, or a lot of these guys, former starters, who are struggling to stay healthy and were reclamation projects. Or in the case of Hubbard, proven ability to handle the ball and basically just needed more chances to do it. And Hubbard got his chance last year when Jonathan Brooks, the rookie, got hurt, and they leaned into Hubbard. If not for that, Hubbard would have been a capable backup at a cheap price. The dynasty values this year, and I was looking at quarterback values, by the way, this morning, and I saw J.J. McCarthy in Dynasty was 17. Drake May was 9. I don't understand the logic. There's a good example of, wait, what? Is it just because we've seen Drake May, but we haven't seen J.J. McCarthy? Well, that's irrelevant to me. McCarthy stepping into a far better offensive situation than May has today. McCarthy is actually a little bit younger, and I think McCarthy is an easy dynasty get. And I think a year from now or 2 years from now, we will see, oh, of course, why was McCarthy down at 17? That was so obvious. Dak Prescott at 19. Trevor Lawrence is still only like 26 years old at 20. Bryce Young at 23. Tua Tagovailoa at 25. These are guys who could, as long as they stay healthy, and as long as they're still decent, as long as they still have their starting jobs, are going to be better than their ADP suggests in Dynasty. It's not like, Matthew Stafford at 29, where you're just hoping he plays 2 more years. Instead, look at Sam Darnold, whose QB 30 Dynasty ADP screams by because of his youth, because of his surrounding talent on his new team. He's not going away. He's not going to suddenly fade into oblivion, still in his 20s. Just doesn't make sense. So we look at ADPs for running backs, and this is how I'll end it, back to running backs in Dynasty. Top 8, I see Bucky Irving at 7. I've talked about this before. I think it's a huge mistake. I see Kyren Williams at 10. I think that's a huge mistake. Derrick Henry at 11 will turn, I think, 32 in January. Big mistake unless you need to win now. I mean, if this is about win now, yeah, Derrick Henry could be valued at 11. In general, though, it doesn't make much sense to me to value a guy like that at 11 when realistically in the next year or two, he'll be either done or he will be regressing significantly as he approaches 33, 34 years old. And you go down much lower, and this is back to how do we spot the bargains before we know they're bargains. So I've talked about 2022, 2023, 2024. Now we're talking about 2025. We don't have the advantage of hindsight, but we see Todd Brooks at 72. We see Kyle Monangai at 70, playing behind DeAndre Swift and Rashawn Johnson. Woody Marks at 68, Will Shipley at 69. Jerome Ford still at 65, even though Quinton Judkins might not play much this year. Who knows? I mean, Ford might reassert himself. He's still young enough to have some value for several years to come. He's actually one spot behind Nick Chubb, which makes absolutely no sense to me. that Ford, who essentially replaced Chubb, is still ranked in Dynasty below Chubb. That's more name recognition and history than it is actually future examination of what these guys can do. Um, Austin Eckler's at 61. It doesn't make much sense when you look at that. But then you go ahead and say DJ Giddens, the potential backup for Jonathan Taylor at 57. Blake Corum and Jarquez Hunter at 56 and 55. They're teammates playing behind Kyron Williams. You know my views on Williams. I don't think he's going to have a long career as a starter. I think he'll top out at the most 2 more years as a weekly starter. So you've got a young Corum and a young Hunter backing him up, both outside the top 50 in Dynasty. Why not? Why not take both and hedge? This is a good example of what I referenced at the start of this podcast, where you take 2 or 3 guys in a backfield where you don't think the starter is going to last much longer. And that's the quintessential example of cracking a bargain. And then there's Devin Neal at 52, Jalen Wright at 51, Braylon Allen still at 50. Plenty of value with these guys. Plenty of opportunities to find future star on a team, especially if you carve out your bench and say, instead of holding 6 wide receivers on your bench, hold 3 to go with your starters, or maybe 4, and just string together some backfields on the cheap. So if you do Dynasty, you know what to do. I'm not saying you just cash in on guys outside the top 50. I am saying that it's really important to recognize how frequently the guys near the top have short career spans going forward, and how frequently guys near the back have longer career spans. And it's a game of numbers. If you invest in 8 risky running backs, you will probably have 1 or 2 break through. And that is a better investment to me than just randomly taking, and I'm not saying random, but randomly taking a backup tight end here and a couple backup wide receivers there and try to fill out your roster. I'd rather just stock up on backfields with running backs who might not be valuable in the next 2 years, but one of them in the next 3 years might be your next starter. I'm BJ Riddell, Fantasy Football for Winners. Follow me on the blog, ask any questions you want through Gmail or in the community. See you tomorrow.